You're listening to the Save the Marriage podcast. Your marriage can be saved and strengthened if you have the right information. Join Dr. Lee Baucom as he explores ways for you to improve your relationship and your life, starting right now.
Hi, this is Lee Baucom. If you've just found me on YouTube, well, we're trying out something new. If you found me on my website, we've been doing this for a while. I'm the creator of the Save the Marriage system. If you haven't found that, you can find me at savethemarriage.com. Now, for the last quarter of a century, I've been helping couples to save their marriage no matter where they are, even if only one person wants to work on it. And during that time, I also have created a podcast, and that podcast has been downloaded almost 2 million times so far. That podcast is designed to give you a lot of pieces of how you can work on saving your marriage. Well, we decided to do something a little bit new. I decided that it was time to put some videos out since people like to do the videos. So now you can either listen by podcast at my website, savethemarriageblog.com. That's a shortcut to get to the podcast. So that's savethemarriageblog.com. Or you can find me on YouTube, or you can find me in Stitcher, or in the iTunes podcast, or even in the Google podcast. So lots of different ways to find me. I'm just trying to make sure that you get the information the way you want to. So let's talk a little bit about what this is about. I'm trying to give you strategies and understanding, mindsets and tools to help you save your marriage. And today I want to talk to you about what I think of as the games couples play. Years ago, back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a book, Games People Play. And understand that when this author was talking about games, it was not having fun playing games. It was communication tricks. It was ways that people were doing communication patterns in not so healthy ways, and also thought patterns in not so healthy ways. Well, the fact is that couples do that all of the time. Couples get into communication patterns that are not particularly helpful and not particularly healthy. I've noticed this over and over because I'll watch the games play out constantly in my work on the office or on Skype or the phone, the way I do coaching now. So I realized that one of the things that might be useful for you is to begin to think about the games, because you may be playing those games with your spouse. Now, understand, these games are not games that you choose to play. You didn't set out to play the game that I'm going to describe. Those games develop in the dance of marriage. When you're with somebody long enough, you learn how to play the role and how to move through the dance steps together. The problem is sometimes those dance steps aren't particularly helpful or healthy. And these are particularly true with the games that couples play. So let's talk about the games couples play. The first one is Prove You Love Me. Prove You Love Me. Now, Prove You Love Me is a game that couples play when they are trying to get the other person to show how much they love. And they can do it in lots of different ways. Do you read my mind? Do you understand when I don't say things? Do you react in the right way when I have an emotion? Because if I don't, I'm going to read it. Or if you don't, I'm going to read it as you don't love me. And so the Prove You Love Me puts a standard, a height on how somebody has to prove it. And it can happen in lots of ways. Prove you love me by how much time you spend with me. Prove you love me with how many gifts you give me. Prove you love me with the sex you give me or don't give me. Prove you love me with affection. Prove you love me with letting me do what I want to do. Prove you love me in lots of ways that are usually about you giving up something for me so that there's proof. Now, there are some interesting pieces to that. One is the prove means that you don't trust or your spouse doesn't trust the love. Otherwise, there's no reason for the prove. And that's the game part of this, is you're trying to prove something because you don't trust something is truly there. That's part of the damage too, because then the spouse is constantly feeling like the love isn't making it there. So that's the irony of that game. When you play Prove You Love Me, what ends up happening is a spouse feels like they can't do it. So part of the reflection I want you to make is, do you ever play that Prove You Love Me game? Does your spouse play the Prove You Love Me game? That game can begin to cut from underneath the relationship because there's no way to get to that place where somebody goes, oh, okay, I finally feel it. Because the prove always gets to be a higher mark. Prove it to me always grows higher and higher. The person who wants the proof will quickly discard the proof and ask for more proof. So there's an ever escalating level of what it takes to prove that love. And that's where this game falls apart. You're constantly trying to prove something that shouldn't have to be proven. You've already made that promise along the way, and if there's a reason to prove it, you might want to look at why that has to happen. Is it an insecurity that's there that's based on lack of love in the past, or is it just a place where prove you love me really gives you power? That's one of the things you're going to notice about these games. There's always a piece of the power behind it. That's one of the things that's always embedded in these games is who has the power. So let's talk about the next game, You Owe Me. Now, You Owe Me comes in lots of different ways, and it also undercuts the relationship. You owe me sometimes is because, I married you, and so you owe me because I did that for you. Or I took you out of your family, or I took you away from wherever, or I didn't really want to get married, but I did it for you. That's a you owe me. Sometimes it's a you owe me for what I do for you. And sometimes that gets really mixed up around our sex and intimacy issues, because prove you love me and you owe me can get really tightly bound into that, and a feeling of, hey, I did this for you, you do this for me, and that really lopsides a relationship. You owe me is, as you can see, linked into that proving part. But it comes from a different level. The prove you love me is from a place where I need that proof. You owe me is a leverage point that I'm using to get what I want. But notice there's a very common element in both of those, which is it's about two individuals pulling at each other, which leads to our third game. I'm in charge is the name of that game. Notice how often both people play I'm in charge. I'm in charge is I get to make the decisions. I make the most money, so I get to call the shots. Or I'm in charge of this part of our family, and so you have to fall in line. The problem with I'm in charge is that sometimes both people are vying for that position. That's a problem. The second one is the other person didn't say, I agree, you can be in charge. In other words, somebody has assumed it without it being chosen. And even if it's chosen, even if you sit down and said, okay, you're in charge of that and I'm in charge of that, sometimes those rules change over time. But there's something more subtle that's coming through these games, and that is the role of fear. I'm in charge often comes out of the place of fear, because you need to be in charge, in control, in order to fight back the fears that are there. You owe me is also based in a fear, a scarcity, a lack of things that somehow the other person has to get to an even point, a ledger, a balance ledger out there. And prove you love me is definitely rooted in fear, a fear of not being loved. There's a central piece that is missing in all of that, and that is what I call being a we. Being a we, for me, is the role of marriage. That is our goal. Now, nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you that little secret when you're getting married. They kind of do. They talk about two people becoming one body. And so the imagery is there, but we don't understand that that is a psychological reality of when two people come together. If they don't get to the place where they're at a we place, we are in this together, we the team, then they begin to be you versus me. It starts out as you and me. Every marriage starts as you and me, and you're working to become a we. If that doesn't happen, it becomes you versus me. And eventually, it usually ends up being me, because at some point it falls apart. The goal of a marriage is a we, whether you knew it or not, which is why the I'm in charge is kind of an irrelevant point. We have to get through life together. Now, it doesn't mean that both of you have to make every single decision together and that both of you have to be there for paying the bills and every other detail of life, but you both have to be on the same page, moving in the same direction, knowing that there are places where you need to view this as we are in this together. There's no I'm in this. We are in this. I see this as us in this process together. There's a team there. I've got your back. We're in it together moving forward. What you'll notice also is a problem in our fourth game, which is take care of me. Sometimes take care of me is one of those ways that we feel loved. Somebody will play the game of being weak or sick or helpless or something else. They need help. And so the take care of me begins to be a game. Now, let me be very clear that there are times when all of us need help. And there are times when every marriage, one person is saying, let me be the caregiver. If there's an illness or an injury or something is happening, you absolutely take care of your partner. So what we're talking about in this is when it becomes a permanent feature. That the take care of me is a permanent place where one person is always having to do the taking care of and the other person is always getting taken care of. And so in that process, there is an imbalance that begins to grow. It shrinks the capacity of the person who has to be taken care of, and it traps the person who has to take care. And that's where this begins to be a very tiresome pattern. Now, let me first tell you that there are lots of people who find somebody else because they match. One person wants to be the caregiver and the other person wants to be taken care of. And they match in the beginning and somehow those two pieces mesh for a while. But generally, one or the other person gets tired of that role over time. And that role begins to defeat them. So take care of me is not so much whether it happens here or there, but whether it becomes a permanent feature of the relationship. In a great marriage, when it's time to take care of someone, it's done lovingly and carefully. What I'm pointing to is when it's not a point in time, but a role that's concrete, a role that can't be escaped, that both people have a place to play in that and neither can escape their particular role. So the fifth game is you need me, I need you. And the problem with that is the need part. I don't really believe in a marriage that there is I have to have this person. You need me or I need you as much as it's an I want to be a part of your life and I want you to be a part of my life. Now, let me also be clear here that there is an interdependence that comes from being that we. There is a place where you join together as a team and become that place where you see things together. So there is an interdependence. And yes, you may need each other to finish the parenting task and to finish the financial tasks and all of the other parts of life. So where you link together. But I need you that comes from a personality piece, from a psychological perspective. Comes from that neediness where, the line from the movie where the person says, you complete me. Well, you complete me somehow means that you're incomplete by yourself. And the first place where we bring in a we is having two whole people bringing their best selves to the relationship. And the problem is a lot of people don't realize that they're whole. They miss that part. They miss the fact that they've already got that. And so they put it on the other person to complete them. That's not the capacity of a relationship. So what happens if you're playing these games? Well, you may already have felt the pressure of that. You may already have felt what it's like when there's constantly someone saying, prove you love me. You may have already felt the pressure of the you owe me feeling of, oh, gosh, how do I pay back that person? You may already have struggled through the control issues of I'm in charge, one person or the other wanting to be in charge and that feeling like control and it feeling like there's no way to be equal partners in that. You may already have felt the struggle of, gosh, why do I always have to take care of this person? Or why am I always being taken care of? How can I become an adult? And how can you find that place where it's two adults coming together? And how do you escape the neediness? When the neediness kind of bleeds out, eventually somebody outgrows it. These games that couples play are the ways that you watch the beginning points and then the difficult points of a relationship as it gets into trouble. The way through that is to recognize that the real goal here is to love each other, to be loving, to get to that place of being a we. Now, if you're struggling, if you go, wow, I see myself in those games, let me suggest that you try out the Save the Marriage system because it's going to tell you how the relationship should be, how to get to that place of being a we, and how to bring your best self into it, how to make sure that you're bringing and delivering the best you can be in the relationship. If you're playing the games, recognize that at a minimum, it needs to change. If you need help with that change, visit me at savethemarriage.com and let's see if we can get that game reversed and get you to a better place. If this has been helpful, I would love it if you would share it. There's so many ways of sharing videos and audios, so do it in whatever social media you love, but make sure that if this has been helpful, you let other people know it's been helpful. This is Lee Balcom wishing you the best for a great marriage.
You've been listening to Save the Marriage podcast. For more information and help, please visit us at SaveTheMarriage.com.